At my graduation party, my wealthy grandmother asked, "Did the $5,000 monthly tuition help?" I froze. I'd been cleaning offices to pay fees. Then I showed the receipts. Every transfer had gone to my brother. Everyone went silent, but the dean's call that night exposed something worse. My name is Marin Calloway. I am 24 years old, and I graduated 3 days ago with a degree in accounting from a university I paid for myself, night shift by night shift, fee by fee, on a yellow legal pad I kept in my car so I would always know exactly where I stood. This is the story of the money my grandmother sent for 4 years that never reached me, the brother who spent it, the father who let him, and the phone call I received at 11:17 on the night of my own graduation party that made everything worse and then, somehow, better. If you have ever worked in the dark while someone else took the credit for the light, stay with me. Because this story ends in the same backyard where it started, and by the end of it, the numbers do the talking. I want to tell you what I said to my grandmother in that backyard, but first I need to tell you what I did for 4 years to get there. I grew up in a house where everything was weighed, not by a scale you could see, but by a logic that was always operating, always tallying. My brother Rhett was 2 years older and had the particular quality that certain sons have: the ability to fail and be explained. When he dropped out of community college after his first semester, my father called it a hard season. When the car dealership Rhett tried to open in his mid-20s went under in 11 months, my father called it valuable experience. When Rhett moved back into the house at 23, with no plan and no savings, my father gave him the larger of the 2 spare bedrooms and told my mother to make up the sheets. I watched all of this and learned a specific lesson, the kind of lesson that does not announce itself and does not need to. It arrived quietly, the way most important things arrive, somewhere around the age of 15. The lesson was this: there was one child in this house who was expected to produce results, and one child who was expected to be given chances. I was the first kind. Rhett was the second. I remember the year I was 16 and Rhett was 18, and he came home with a report card that had 2 failing grades on it. My father sat with him at the kitchen table for 2 hours that evening. I could hear their voices from the hallway, patient, low, problem-solving. My father had his hand on the table between them, the way he sat when he was taking something seriously. When I had brought home a B- in geometry the previous spring, my father had looked at it and said I should figure out what I was doing wrong. That was the whole conversation. This is not a complaint. I want to be precise about that. It is simply what was true, and I learned to work with what was true rather than spending energy on what wasn't. I applied to colleges my senior year without telling my parents until after I had been accepted, because I did not want the period of waiting to be contaminated by their ambivalence. My father's response when I told him, as I said, was a handshake and the observation that he had always known I would figure it out. My mother made a special dinner that night, pot roast, my favorite, and that was the warmest anyone was about it. My grandmother called me herself the evening she found out. She was warm and specific in the way she always was. She asked which program, she asked about the location, she asked if I had looked into housing. She said she was proud. She did not say it the way my father said things, as a summary. She said it the way you say something you have been waiting to say. That phone call was the last time either of us talked about my education as something she was supporting financially, because neither of us knew, for 4 years, that she was. When I was accepted to the university, my father shook my hand and told me he always knew I'd figure it out. That was the extent of the celebration. There was no dinner, no call to the grandparents that evening, no discussion of how it was going to be paid for. The assumption in our house was stated once and then left to hover over everything. Marin would manage. When I asked, at 18, for $400 to secure the deposit on my first apartment near campus, my mother told me, without unkindness and without apology, that a family could only back one horse at a time. She meant Rhett. The car dealership was still operating then. My father had just extended him a loan that I later found out was $12,000. The family had one horse, and it was not me. I did not ask again. I want to be precise about what I mean when I say I paid for my own education, because I think paid for myself is one of those phrases people nod at without really seeing. So let me be specific. I cleaned offices. 3 nights a week, starting at 10 in the evening and finishing at 2 in the morning, I moved through corporate buildings with a cart and a mop and a pair of headphones. I cleaned the bathrooms on floors 9 through 14 of a building downtown. I emptied the trash from 217 cubicles in a financial firm on the east side. I wiped down the glass conference tables that people had sat around all day having meetings about things that were worth more money than I earned in a month. I did this for 4 years. The floors I cleaned most often were in a financial services building. I am not being ironic about this. I cleaned the offices of people who managed money for a living at 2 in the morning while I was enrolled in an accounting program during the day. I mopped the tile in the corridor outside a portfolio management division. I wiped the whiteboards where someone had done calculations in red marker and not erased them before they left. Numbers, balance columns. A quarterly projection that someone had drawn a circle around. I always erased those whiteboards completely. It felt like the right thing to do. My supervisor was a woman named Ruth. She was 61 years old and had been with the company for 19 years and had seen every kind of college student come through. She never asked what I was studying. She did not make conversation about my future. But she made sure I was scheduled for extra shifts in the weeks before finals when I needed the income. And she never scheduled me on the morning of an exam if I gave her the date in advance. That was the most specific and functional kindness anyone extended to me during those 4 years, and I have not forgotten it. I had a yellow legal pad I kept on the passenger seat of my car. Every shift I logged the hours, the gross pay, and what I owed that month. Tuition installment, housing. The grocery total I tried to keep under $60 a week. The dental copay I put off twice before I couldn't anymore. I tracked it the way you track a thing when you cannot afford to be surprised by it. Not because I was an accountant yet, but because I had grown up in a house where money was only discussed when someone wanted something. Never when it was being spent, and I had decided early that I would never be surprised by a number I should have seen coming. The legal pad had 63 pages by the time I graduated. Here is what I did not know during those 4 years. My grandmother had set up a wire transfer the month I enrolled, $5,000 outgoing every month to my parents' joint account. She had done it through her private banker, a careful man named Mr. Alderman, who sent her a quarterly ledger of all her outgoing transfers. She had sat down with him and said she wanted to make sure her granddaughter's education was taken care of, and he had helped her structure the payments, and she had felt the particular relief that people with resources feel when they believe a problem has been solved with the proper application of those resources. She thought my tuition was paid. She thought I was taken care of. She thought the monthly wire was covering my fees and my housing, and perhaps even the dental work she had always meant to ask me about. The transfers went to my parents' joint account. From there, they moved to my brother. Every month, for 4 years, while I was emptying trash on the east side and budgeting $60 a week for groceries. $5,000 was being deposited into an account controlled by my father and redistributed to a brother who had never, in his adult life, been asked to carry anything by himself. I did not know this for 4 years. I did not know it because no one told me, and I did not know to ask. My grandmother and I spoke on the phone every few weeks. She asked how school was going. I told her it was hard, and I was managing. She took managing to mean the money was helping. I said managing because I had learned, in my particular family, that expressing need was the same as announcing a weakness, and I had decided a long time ago not to be weak in front of anyone. Not even the person who would have helped me if she had known the truth. That word, managing, my father used it about me the way some people use words that sound like compliments and function as permissions. She always manages, he would say to relatives who asked how I was doing at school. She's the one who figures things out on her own. He said it with a kind of admiring finality, the way you might describe a plant that had survived without watering, as though the surviving was a quality I had chosen rather than a condition I had been placed in. He was not wrong that I managed, he was wrong about what it had cost. There was a moment in my junior year when I came close to understanding. I had taken an extra shift to cover a shortfall from an unexpected textbook expense, which meant I worked 4 nights that week instead of 3. On the 4th night, I knocked over a bucket of cleaning solution near the elevators on the 12th floor and spent 40 minutes cleaning the cleaning materials off the tile. By the time I reached my car, it was close to 3 in the morning. I sat in the parking garage and I opened the legal pad. The column for that week was covered in figures, what I had earned, what I owed, what remained. The math was correct. It always was. I thought about calling my parents. Not to ask for money. That question had been answered years earlier. I thought about calling just to tell someone I was tired, just to say the words out loud to a voice I recognized. I put the phone back in my bag. I drove home and I went to sleep, and I did not call. And the following week I came back to work, and Ruth had already posted the schedule, and I was on it 3 nights as usual, and I went. That was the cost. Not dramatic. Not a single broken moment. Just a continuous, manageable, invisible expenditure that I made every week for 4 years without anyone knowing what it was paying for. The cleaning company was good work, by which I mean it was honest and it paid on time and the hours were predictable. There is a particular clarity to work that happens at 2 in the morning in an empty building. You cannot avoid the thing you are doing, because there is nothing else to look at. The floors need mopping, the trash needs emptying, the whiteboards need erasing. You do the thing. The thing gets done. You go home. I learned more about discipline in those buildings than I did in any classroom. I do not say that against the classroom. I say it because there is a specific quality of focus that develops when the only thing standing between you and what you are trying to build is the amount of work you are willing to do, and you have already decided the answer to that question. I decided the answer early. Every night I walked into those buildings, I was deciding it again. Every page of the legal pad was a record of that decision. By the time I graduated, I had made it more than 400 times. The first thing that didn't fit arrived 14 days before graduation. My grandmother's younger sister, Vera, called to congratulate me on finishing my degree. Vera is 68, sharp, the kind of woman who files things away for years until they become relevant. She called in the evening while I was making dinner and said she was proud of me, and she knew it hadn't been easy. And then she said something that I had to ask her to repeat. She said she was glad my grandmother's support had helped. She said she knew $5,000 a month had seemed like a lot, but that grandmother had worried it wasn't enough. I set the spoon down on the counter. "What do you mean?" I said. "The tuition wire," Vera said. She set it up when you enrolled. She's mentioned it to me a few times over the years. She was always hoping it was enough. I told Vera I would call her back. I hung up and sat down at the kitchen table. Then I opened my laptop and logged into the university's student payment portal. The history was clean and precise, the way these portals always are. Every installment I had paid was listed: the date, the amount, the source. My checking account. Student loan disbursements. My checking account again. 4 years of payments, all from accounts I controlled. Not one external transfer. Not one payment from any account I did not personally manage. I closed the laptop and opened my bank's mobile app. I went through the incoming transfers in the account I had used for tuition payments. Payroll from the cleaning company, every 2 weeks. A $200 birthday transfer from Vera, the same one she sent every year. 2 small refunds from the university for overpayments I had made during enrollment. That was everything that had come in over 4 years from any outside source. I called my bank the next morning before I left for work. I asked the representative to search the account history for any incoming wire transfers above $500 from an external source over the previous 4 years. She searched, she came back. There were none. I thanked her and wrote down the time. Then I called Vera back and told her what I had found. The payment portal. The bank record. No transfer had reached me. Vera was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Then where did it go?" I told her I was working on that. I was, but I needed one more piece before I had the shape of it. Vera called Mr. Alderman herself that afternoon. He was thorough, the kind of thorough my grandmother had trusted for 20 years, and he confirmed the records within the hour. He had the full ledger in front of him. 48 wire transfers, $5,000 each, all outgoing from my grandmother's account, all received by my parents' joint account. The first had been sent the month I enrolled. The most recent had arrived 11 days ago. Not one had been forwarded to the university. The money had sat in the joint account and moved over 4 years into my brother's accounts. I could not see those records directly, but Vera could trace the pattern from what Mr. Alderman confirmed and from what she knew of the years in question. The failed car dealership, which my father had funded and continued to supplement even after it closed. The apartment renovation Rhett had done the year after. The steady, quiet, unremarkable redistribution of my grandmother's generosity to a son who had never, in his adult life, needed to document anything. Vera had also matched the outgoing withdrawals. Within 48 hours of nearly every wire, the same amount or a split portion had moved toward Rhett's dealership account, renovation invoices, or the account later tied to the student aid disbursement. The trail was not hidden. It had simply never been looked at. I sat at my kitchen table that evening with the legal pad open. I wrote the number at the top of a clean page. $240,000. Below it, I worked through what I had actually paid, semester by semester, shift by shift. The earnings I had brought in from 4 years of cleaning work came to $61,400. The student loans I had taken and would spend the next several years repaying came to $38,200. Just under $100,000 to fund an education my grandmother believed had been covered. And then some. I looked at the 2 numbers, the one above the line and the one below it. The distance between them was the distance between what my family had taken and what I had carried. I wrote the date of the graduation party at the bottom of the page. 4 days. I was not going to call my father. I was not going to send an email or request a meeting or try to have a private conversation about this before the party. There was no version of that conversation that would produce anything other than management, a performance of accountability without any of the substance. He had been managing this for 4 years. He would manage a private confrontation the same way. What I had was enough to speak once, in a room with witnesses, to the woman who deserved to hear it from me directly. I closed the legal pad. I went to sleep. I told one person, my college roommate Phoebe, who would be at the party. I told her on the phone the night before the graduation dinner. I laid it out the way I would lay out a financial summary, the transfers, the accounts, the university records, the total. I did not ask her what to do. I told her because she was the only person in my life who had seen me leave for cleaning shifts at 10 in the evening and come back at 2 in the morning smelling like industrial floor cleaner, and she deserved to understand why that had been necessary. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "What are you going to do at the party?" I told her I was going to let the party happen. "And if someone asks?" she said. "Then I'll answer," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "I'll be right there." The morning of the graduation party, I took the legal pad out of my bag and set it on the passenger seat the way I always had. I looked at it for a moment. It was worn at the spiral, and the cover had a coffee ring on the corner from a shift I'd worked during finals week in my junior year, when I'd been too tired to look for a coaster. 63 pages of numbers that had kept me straight for 4 years. I left it on the seat and went inside to get dressed. I came back out 20 minutes later in the dress I had bought for $10 at a second-hand shop 3 weeks earlier, the navy one with the good cut, and I stood beside the car for a moment in the parking lot of my building. The morning was already warm. The graduation banner my grandmother had ordered was probably already hung. The guests were probably already starting to arrive. I put my hand on the roof of the car. I thought about the last 4 years, not as a summary, but as a series of specific images. The 12th floor on a Tuesday night. The whiteboard covered in red numbers I always erased completely. Ruth posting the schedule on the board in the break room without looking up. The legal pad on the passenger seat where I would glance at it at red lights. Checking the column without thinking about it, the way you check a clock. I had done the thing. Every week, I had done the thing. I got in the car and drove to my grandmother's house. My grandmother's backyard was everything she had wanted it to be. White folding chairs arranged in clusters, food laid out on tables under a canopy at the back, citronella candles along the porch railing already lit, though it was still light out. She had put the banner up herself, Vera had told me. She was proud. She had been proud for 4 years of a story she believed was true. My father arrived before I did and had already positioned himself at the center of things by the time I walked through the gate. He was the kind of man who understood the architecture of a gathering, where to stand so that people came to him rather than requiring him to move, how to angle himself so that he appeared to be the host even in someone else's home. He had dressed well. He was shaking hands and laughing. My brother was near the drink table with a new shirt, and his particular way of not quite meeting eyes, the careful sideways attention of someone who has learned to steer his gaze past the people he has wronged. He was good at surfaces. He always had been. My mother touched my arm when I walked past and said I looked beautiful. She said it quietly, and she meant it. That was the whole of it. I took a glass from the nearest table and held it. 40 minutes into the party, my grandmother crossed the lawn toward me. She walked the way she always walked, deliberate, unhurried, pearl earrings, hair set the night before. She took both my hands. She asked her question, whether 5,000 a month had been enough. I held the glass. I held her hands. I calculated one more time the number I already knew. Then I said, "Grandma, can I show you something?" She said yes without hesitating. I set the glass down on a nearby chair. I took out my phone. I opened the university's student payment portal first and turned the screen toward her. She read the payment history with the focused attention of someone who understands what a financial record is and what it means. Her grip on my hands had not loosened. "This is everything I paid," I said. "Every installment, every semester, all from my own account." She looked at me, not with confusion, with the beginning of understanding. "Your transfers didn't reach me," I said. "I didn't know they existed until 2 weeks ago." I opened the banking app. I showed her 4 years of incoming deposits, payroll, Vera's birthday transfer, nothing else. She studied the screen. Then she looked across the yard. My father was already watching us. He had been watching for several minutes, tracking the conversation from across the yard with the particular stillness of someone who understands that something is happening and cannot yet determine what to do about it. When my grandmother's gaze met his, he walked toward us. The smile he arrived with was too wide and came a half-second too fast. "Everything okay?" he said. "Vera contacted Mr. Alderman," I said. "He confirmed 48 transfers, received by your joint account, none forwarded to the university." He looked at my grandmother first, then at me. The smile was still there, but it had changed quality. "There's context here, Mom. The account was managed for the whole family's needs. Marin never asked about it. She was independent. She never needed I cleaned offices," I said. His voice stopped. 3 nights a week. 10 in the evening until 2 in the morning, for 4 years. I was looking at my grandmother, not at him. I paid every dollar of my own tuition. I have 63 pages of records in my car. I paused. "I'm not angry that it was hard. I just needed you to know." Vera was standing near the drink table. She had her phone in her hand and the speaker on. She had called Mr. Alderman before the party at my request. He spoke from the phone in Vera's hand, his name, his title, the account confirmation, the number of transfers, the amounts, the fact that no forwarding instructions had ever been issued on any of them. He spoke for about 90 seconds, clearly and without qualification. Then, Vera lowered the phone. The yard had gone quiet in the way yards go quiet when the conversation that everyone can hear is the kind no one expected. My father's voice rose. It went through several registers: explanation, justification, administration, context. With each one it got louder while the yard got quieter. He said Rhett had been struggling. He said I had always been the capable one. The one who managed. The one who never needed anything. He said the money had been distributed to where the family's needs were greatest, and that this had always been his role, as a father, to make those determinations. He was standing. His hands moved when he talked. The empty cup was still in one hand. I was standing too, but my hands were at my sides and my voice, when I used it, did not change register. "You said I always managed on my own," I said. "You were right. I managed every shift, every dollar, every payment. I just didn't know I was managing alone." His voice kept going. It went past the echo line and into repetition, which is what voices do when they have run out of ground to stand on but have not yet accepted it. He pointed at Vera, then at me, then at the phone in Vera's hand, as though the problem were the confirmation rather than what it confirmed. Rhett, across the yard, had set his cup down on the table. He did not speak. He looked at the tablecloth. Phoebe set her glass down and moved one step to her left, which put her directly beside me. My mother looked at the ground between her feet. She looked at it for a long time. Rhett finally looked up from the tablecloth. "You were already managing, Marin," he said. "Dad said the money could actually help me." That was the first honest thing he had said all evening. "You were right about one thing, Rhett," I said. "I did manage. I just never agreed to manage what you took." He did not answer. He looked back at the tablecloth. My grandmother released my hands. She turned to face my father and my brother. Just turned, without hurry, and looked at them both for a moment, with an expression I had not seen on her face before. Not anger, something older and quieter than anger. "Boyd," she said. "Rhett, come inside." She walked toward the house. Her pace did not change. My father's voice dropped mid-sentence. He followed her. Rhett followed him, his shoulders forward, his pace fractionally faster than was natural. The back door opened and closed. I picked up my glass from the chair where I had set it. I took a sip. It was warm water. I drank it anyway. The remaining guests found places to look that were not me. An older cousin rearranged something on the food table that had not needed rearranging. A neighbor of my grandmother's walked quietly to the gate and let himself through it. Two women near the canopy began a conversation in lowered voices about something unrelated, which was the correct response, and which I appreciated. Phoebe stood beside me and said nothing. The citronella candles along the porch railing were still burning. The evening air carried the smell of cut grass, and whatever food was still warm under the canopy. Overhead, the sky had gone from blue to the particular pale gold of early evening. Somewhere past the fence, a car turned onto the street and drove away. I did not go inside. Phoebe drove me home at 9:30. We did not talk about the party. We talked about other things. A show she had been watching, a cafe near her apartment that had changed its menu, the weather for the following week. The kind of normal conversation that becomes necessary after a day that has been nothing of the kind. Before she started the car, she asked me if I was okay. I considered the question honestly. I had been waiting, I realized, to feel something large, anger or grief or the particular exhaustion of carrying a truth for too long and finally putting it down. What I felt instead was quieter than that, not relief exactly, more like the sensation of a calculation that has finally balanced, both sides equal. The columns closed. "I think so," I said. "Yes." She drove. I watched the streetlights pass. I thought about my grandmother in that house with my father and my brother. I did not know what she was saying to them. I did not need to. She had been lied to for 4 years by people she trusted, and she was a woman who understood accounts. She would know exactly what to say. She texted me at 10:15. It said, "Come for breakfast tomorrow. Just us. I want to know everything." I typed back, "I'll be there at 8. She sent one more, "I'm so sorry, Marin, I should have asked sooner." I looked at that message for a long time in the dark of Phoebe's car. I thought about all the things I could say in response. That it wasn't her fault, that she couldn't have known, that the people who should have been sorry were not the ones apologizing. I typed, "You asked as soon as you thought to ask. That's all any of us can do." Then, I put my phone in my bag and looked out the window for the rest of the ride. I took the stairs. I set my bag on the kitchen table and sat down. The legal pad was still in the car. I thought about going back down to get it, and then, I didn't. I sat at the table, and I looked at the wall, and I thought about nothing in particular, which is what my mind did when it had finished the thing it had been working on and needed time to clear before the next one. At 11:17, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, with a university prefix. I answered. "Ms. Calloway," the voice said. "This is Dean Whitfield from the Office of Student Affairs. I apologize for the hour. We've been trying to reach your family for several weeks about an irregularity in your enrollment records. I understand the messages may not have been received. I wanted to reach you directly." I pulled the legal pad toward me from habit, then remembered it was in the car. I grabbed the nearest thing, a receipt from the grocery store on the counter, and wrote down the time and his name on the back. He explained the after-hours call came because the file had moved from financial aid into legal review that afternoon. My parents' landline was still listed as my emergency contact from freshman year, which was why the earlier calls had gone there first. 6 weeks ago, the university's financial aid office had flagged a series of disbursement requests associated with my student ID. 2 semesters of aid applications had been filed under my enrollment status by someone who was not me. The name on the banking information did not match mine. The applications had been processed before the irregularity was caught. $34,000 had been disbursed before the audit identified it. My brother had used my enrollment status to apply for financial aid. My student ID. My active enrollment record. Applications filed in 2 separate semesters, each resulting in a disbursement sent to an account with his banking information. The financial aid office had caught it in a routine review. They had attempted to contact the family. The call 6 weeks ago had gone to my parents' landline. My father had received it. He had not returned it, and he had not told me. The university's legal office had already been notified. The file was being forwarded to the State Education Authority. It was no longer a financial aid matter. I thanked Dean Whitfield. I asked for the reference number. I wrote it on the grocery receipt below his name. I told him I would be available to provide any information the university needed. After I hung up, I sat at the table for a while. Then I wrote 3 numbers on the back of the receipt, one below the other. $240,000. $34,000. $99,600. The first was what my family had taken. The second was what my brother had additionally stolen, on his own, using my name. The third was what I had paid and owed myself, the cleaning shifts and the loans stacked end to end. I looked at the 3 numbers for a long time. Then I folded the receipt and put it in my bag, in the pocket where I usually kept the legal pad. My father had built the system. Rhett had used it. My mother had protected it by calling it temporary. The months that followed were quieter than you might expect. I had breakfast with my grandmother the morning after the party. She had made coffee and set out the good cups, the ones she used when something mattered, and we sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything. The shifts, Ruth, the legal pad. The dental copay I had delayed twice, the junior year night when I had considered calling someone just to say I was tired and had not done it. She listened without interrupting. She had her hands around her coffee cup, and she did not put it down the entire time I talked. When I finished, she sat for a moment, and then she said, "I want to see the legal pad." I went to my car and got it. I brought it back inside and set it on the table between us. She opened it to the first page and read it the way Mr. Alderman read ledgers, carefully, from left to right, then down the column. She turned the pages slowly. She got to the middle, where the handwriting changed slightly because I had switched pens during a shift, and she paused there. She looked at 63 pages of my education. When she closed it, she did not speak for almost a full minute. Then she said, "Tell me about Ruth." I told her. The extra shifts before finals. The schedule posted on the board in the break room. The way Ruth never asked about my major and never made me explain why I needed the hours. My grandmother nodded. "She saw you," she said. "She saw the schedule," I said. That was enough. My grandmother looked at me across the table, and I saw something move across her face. Not guilt, exactly, though that was part of it. Something more like recognition. The look of someone who has understood a thing about a person they loved that they should have understood sooner and is deciding what to do with that understanding going forward. "We are going to fix what can be fixed," she said, "and we are going to make sure the rest of it counts for something." I did not ask her what she meant. I trusted that she meant it, and I had learned in the previous 4 years to trust the things that were written down over the things that were only said. She meant it. My grandmother's attorney, Dana Caldwell, sent a formal demand letter to my father within 3 weeks of the graduation party. 18 pages, thorough, referencing the bank records and Mr. Alderman's confirmation and the university's payment history. It requested repayment of $240,000 and outlined the legal basis for that request in terms that left very little room for the kind of contextual reframing my father had attempted in the backyard. My grandmother updated her estate documents. My father and mother were removed from the beneficiary structure. The real estate portfolio my father had been managing through his own company, a small arrangement that had given him both income and standing in extended family conversations, was reviewed and terminated. Dana handled it. The termination letter arrived by certified mail. The State Education Authority received the university's referral regarding my brother. Rhett retained an attorney within 4 days. The investigation moved at the pace investigations move, which is not fast. But it moved. What I understood about investigations from the accounting courses I had completed and the reading I had done since was that the pace was not the important thing. The documentation was. And the documentation existed, in full, with dates and account numbers and reference codes, logged by a university financial aid office that had done its job correctly. My father called me twice in the first month. The third time, I was at my desk at the accounting firm where I had started working, and I looked at his name on my phone screen and set it face down on the desk until it stopped ringing. My mother sent a text. A few sentences. She said she didn't know how to explain what had happened, that she had told herself for years it was temporary, a bridge loan of sorts, that it would be repaid before anyone noticed. She said she was sorry. She said she understood if I wasn't ready. I typed back, "I'll call when I'm ready." I meant it. It took 8 months. When I finally called her, we talked for a long time. I did not yell. I did not ask her to justify what she had allowed. I asked her one question: when did she know? She told me. It was 8 months in, the end of my first year. By then, she said, she did not know how to undo it without undoing everything. So she had left it. She had told herself I was managing fine, and she had let that be true because it was easier than the alternative. I listened. I told her I needed more time. She said she understood. We got off the phone, and I sat at the table for a while, and then I went back to work. 3 weeks after graduation, I drove to the cleaning company's office. Ruth was at her desk. She looked up when I came in, surprised in the way that supervisors are surprised when former employees return without a clear purpose. I had written her a card. I handed it to her. In it, I had written that the extra shifts she had given me before finals had mattered, specifically and concretely. In hours logged and dollars paid toward fees I would not otherwise have been able to cover. I had not forgotten it. She read it at her desk while I stood in the doorway. When she looked up, her expression was the one people wear when they did not expect to be thanked and have no prepared response. "You did the work," she said. "You made the schedule," I said. She nodded once. I thanked her and left. I drove back to my apartment with the radio on, which was something I had not done on a drive from that building in 4 years. It felt like the right time to start. In the spring, 6 months after the graduation party, my grandmother called me and told me about the scholarship. She had spoken with Dean Whitfield. She had spoken with Dana. She had sat down with both of them separately and then together, and in those conversations she had described what she wanted to do and why. She told me about those meetings over the phone in some detail, because she wanted me to understand that it had not been a quick decision. She had thought about what form of repair was actually proportional to what had been taken. Not a reimbursement, money moving between accounts, something that would last and that would exist in public where it could not be undone. She decided to establish a fund at the university. $50,000 to begin, with additional contributions she had already committed to over the following 3 years. The fund was restricted to first-generation students who worked while enrolled. Not students who had worked at some point, but students who were working at the time of application, carrying the same kind of invisible arithmetic I had carried on a yellow legal pad in the passenger seat of a used car. Dean Whitfield had been glad to partner with her. He told her, when they met in his office to finalize the terms, that the university saw many students in this position every year. Students who covered their own costs and did not ask for recognition, and would not have known that recognition was available. The fund, he said, would be used immediately. There was no shortage of people who needed it. The following spring, at commencement, he read the name of the scholarship into the microphone. He read my name, and 4,000 people heard it. I was not there for that commencement. I found out from Vera, who had attended, who called me on a Saturday morning and described the moment in the specific way she described things she wanted to make sure I kept. She told me what he said. She told me the exact words. I wrote them down on the back of a notepad I had on my desk at the firm. I put it in the top drawer. I still have it. The day I delivered the scholarship documentation to the financial aid office, I wore the blazer and the flat shoes I had bought for my first week at the firm. The legal pad was in my bag. I had not planned to bring it. It had lived on the passenger seat of my car for 4 years, and the habit of reaching for it and carrying it was slower to leave than I had expected. The financial aid administrator was a young man who processed the paperwork with the efficient calm of someone who handles many documents and takes none of them lightly. He entered the information. He made copies. He asked if I wanted to keep a set for my records. I reached into my bag. I took out the legal pad. I opened it to the last page, the one with the 3 numbers I had written on the night of Dean Whitfield's call, on the back of a grocery receipt that I had later folded inside the front cover. I held the page for a moment. 63 pages of shifts, every hour, every dollar, every fee paid into the dark, logged with a precision that no one had asked for and that I had maintained anyway, because it was the only way I knew to tell the truth to myself about what I was doing and why. I tore the last page carefully along the spiral, folded it once, and placed it inside the scholarship documentation folder. "No," I said. "I don't need a copy." He thanked me and closed the folder. I walked out through the financial aid office and down the main corridor and out the front doors of the building. The afternoon was cool and light, the particular quality of spring air before it tips into summer. I stood on the steps for a moment with the legal pad in my hand. 63 pages lighter. For 4 years, I had kept that record because no one else was going to keep it for me. Every shift, every dollar, every payment made in the dark, documented with the understanding that if I did not write it down, then the only version that would exist would be someone else's, a version where I had always managed fine, where the money had gone where it was needed, where the family had done what families do. The record was placed now. It was in a folder with someone else's name on it, a first-generation student who would work their way through, who would probably keep their own records on their own yellow legal pad, who might not know yet that the thing they were doing alone still counted, that it was being counted somewhere by someone who had been through it. I walked down the steps to the parking lot. I put the legal pad in the back seat instead of the front. I had not planned to do that. It was just where I put it. I drove home with the radio off and the window down a few inches, the way I used to drive home from cleaning shifts when I needed the air to stay awake. The city looked the same as it always had, The numbers were the same numbers they had always been. I just didn't need to carry them anymore. If you have ever kept the record alone, every hour, every dollar, every proof nobody asked for, comment legal pad below. Someone reading may need to know their quiet record still counts, even if no one ever checked. Subscribe for more stories about quiet people who finally stopped carrying what was never theirs to carry.